The day started like any other, but it ended with a life-changing shock. The father, a man who had quietly built a massive fortune over decades, had passed away unexpectedly. The narrator, still in disbelief, was called to the family lawyer's office for the reading of the will. Sitting in the quiet wood-paneled room, the air heavy with grief, they wondered what the future would bring. The lawyer began to read aloud. Every word seemed to echo in the room. Then came the number, $50 million. The narrator felt the weight of it, both awe and confusion. How could one person have amassed so much? And more importantly, what did the father want for them to do with it? Before they could even process the news, the brother arrived. He looked confident, almost too confident, and immediately claimed he had rights to the fortune. "We're family," he said. "Half of this is mine, whether you like it or not." His tone was sharp, leaving no room for discussion. The narrator felt a mix of shock and sadness. This was not just about money. It was about trust, love, and family bonds. As the lawyer continued to explain the distribution of the estate, a subtle hint caught the narrator's attention. The father had left a safe deposit box, and no one knew what was inside. The lawyer mentioned it briefly, noting it contained personal and important documents. Something about the mention of the safe made the narrator's heart race. The father had always been private, always careful, and this box seemed like the key to a deeper truth. The brother barely listened. He was focused on numbers, calculations, and greed. He tried to assert his authority, demanding answers, but the lawyer reminded him that the father's instructions were clear. Some parts of the inheritance were conditional, meant for certain purposes, and access was restricted. The narrator realized that the father had thought of everything. Walking home from the lawyer's office, the narrator's mind raced. The city streets felt quieter than usual. Memories of the father's advice and the late-night conversations about honesty, responsibility, and family responsibility surfaced. It was clear that the inheritance was more than money. It was a test, a lesson, that only someone who understood the father's values could truly handle. At home, tension built. The brothers' aggressive attempts to assert control over the estate began immediately. Emails, calls, and even surprise visits created stress, but the narrator remained calm. They knew that patience and caution were crucial. And through it all, the safe deposit box lingered in their thoughts, a hidden secret waiting to be discovered, promising answers that could change everything. Little did anyone know, the safe would not just reveal money or property. It would reveal a truth so powerful that it would challenge greed, test loyalty, and leave one family member in absolute shock. Little did anyone know, the key to the safe would reveal more than just wealth. That would change everything. The days following the reading of the will were tense. The narrator had returned home, but peace was impossible. The brothers' presence lingered like a storm cloud. And every phone call, every message, seemed designed to provoke conflict. He sent emails demanding details about the estate, called lawyers repeatedly, and even tried to intimidate staff at the family home. The narrator, though saddened by the loss of their father, remained calm. They knew that reacting with anger would only give the brother more power. Instead, they focused on understanding the father's wishes, rereading the documents, and thinking carefully about the next steps. Despite this, the weight of the situation pressed heavily on their shoulders. Family members began to notice the strain. Friends and distant relatives whispered about the estate, spreading rumors and opinions. The brother, enjoying the attention, acted even more aggressively. At family gatherings, he spoke openly about how much he deserved, claiming that being related by blood gave him automatic rights. The narrator felt a deep sense of injustice. This was not just about money, it was about values, respect, and the father's carefully built legacy. Amid the tension, the safe deposit box continued to weigh on the narrator's mind. It had been mentioned in passing during the reading of the will, but no one knew its contents. Memories of private conversations. With the father surfaced, he had often spoken about responsibility, honesty, and the importance of handling wealth with care. The narrator began to wonder if the safe held answers. Answers that could explain why the father had divided the estate the way he did. Despite the growing pressure, the narrator avoided confrontation. They met the brother's demands with calm, measured words. This only seemed to frustrate him more. He became impatient, claiming that the narrator was stalling, hiding information, and trying to cheat him. The narrator, however, knew that patience was the key. The father had planned this carefully. The safe deposit box, still unopened, was the ultimate safeguard of his intentions. One afternoon, the narrator sat alone, reviewing the documents and thinking back on the father's life. The father had always been meticulous, thoughtful, and careful. He had built the fortune not to flaunt it, but to protect his family's future. And now, in these final moments, his plan was clear. The inheritance would teach lessons about patience, wisdom, and integrity values that money alone could never provide. The brother's impatience grew daily. He tried to involve lawyers, banks, and even neighbors, hoping to force a solution. But each attempt only highlighted his lack of understanding of the father's true intentions. The narrator knew that soon, the moment of truth would arrive. The safe deposit box would reveal not only the estate's contents, but also the father's final message. As the narrator prepared to visit the bank, a feeling of anticipation mixed with anxiety settled in. What the father had left inside the safe could change everything, confirming loyalty, exposing greed, and resolving the growing tension in ways no one could predict. 3 days later, a phone call from the bank brought a revelation that neither sibling was prepared for. The moment of truth had arrived, and everything was about to change. The day finally came when the narrator decided it was time to face the safe deposit box. The bank lobby was quiet, polished, and cold. Every detail, the ticking of the clock, the rustle of papers, even the faint hum of the air conditioning, felt heavier than usual. The brother followed, confident and smug, clearly expecting a confrontation and full control. He had convinced himself that the box would justify his claims. The narrator handed the bank officer the key. Hands steady, heart racing, they watched. As the lock clicked open, a soft, metallic sound filled the air. The brother leaned in, eyes wide, ready to claim what he believed was rightfully his. But the contents of the box were not what anyone expected. Inside were several neatly stacked envelopes, official-looking documents, and personal letters. Each item was placed with care, as if the father himself had wanted someone to uncover them. In the exact order they were found, there were bank papers, property deeds, and even a sealed envelope with "For your eyes only" written in the father's neat handwriting. The narrator felt a shiver run down their spine. One by one, we began to examine the contents. The first envelopes contained instructions and legal papers, detailing hidden accounts and investments the brother had never known about. Some of these accounts were designated for charitable causes. Others were for family members who had been quietly cared for throughout the years. It became clear that the father had thought of every possibility, every contingency, and had ensured that only someone responsible would fully understand and use the estate properly. Then, the narrator opened the sealed envelope. Inside was a personal letter from the father, written in his familiar, careful script. The letter was filled with wisdom, guidance, and warnings. He reminded the reader of the importance of honesty, patience, and love. He explained why the estate was divided in certain ways and why some parts were protected by conditions. The words were moving, heartfelt, and impossible to ignore. The brother could no longer hide his shock. His face turned pale, hands trembling slightly. He read over the narrator's shoulder, realizing that much of the fortune had never been about him. The father had left this as a test, a lesson in integrity and understanding. The brother collapsed into disbelief. He had assumed the inheritance was all about wealth and power, but the father had used it to reveal truths that went far deeper than money. For the narrator, the moment was bittersweet. There was relief, yes, but also sorrow. I understood the responsibility that came with the estate and the lesson their father had imparted. The father's intention had always been to prepare them for this moment, to guide them toward wisdom, patience, and leadership, rather than letting greed take over. Even in the brother's stunned silence, there was a trace of realization. Though the journey was far from over, the first major revelation had been made. The father's plan was unfolding exactly as intended, and the family drama had reached its emotional peak. The brother's reaction was more than shocked. He couldn't believe what he had just seen, and the narrator realized that the real inheritance was not money, but the lessons their father had carefully left behind. After the safe deposit box had been opened, the atmosphere between the siblings changed instantly. The narrator remained calm, quietly organizing the documents and letters, while the brother stood frozen. His expression, a mix of disbelief, confusion, and a hint of shame. For the first time, it became clear that this inheritance was not just about money. It was about understanding, responsibility, and the lessons their father had spent a lifetime teaching. The brother, still in shock, finally spoke. His voice was shaky, almost apologetic. I didn't know," he muttered, struggling to find words. The narrator remained composed, sensing that this was the moment their father had prepared them for. "You didn't see the bigger picture," they said gently, "and that's why the safe was important. It wasn't just money. It was about lessons, values, and understanding what Dad wanted from us as a family." Slowly, the brother's emotions began to surface. Anger and greed gave way to regret and realization. He began to read through the father's personal letters and documents, understanding the care and thoughtfulness that had gone into every decision. These saw accounts set aside for family members who had quietly needed help, charitable donations that had been funded without anyone knowing, and messages explaining the father's reasons for dividing the estate in a particular way. The narrator watched quietly, letting the brother process the truth. The father had designed this inheritance as more than a transfer of wealth. He had created a test of character. Only by exercising patience, empathy, and careful thought could someone fully understand his intentions. The brother realized that he had approached everything with entitlement, missing the deeper meaning behind the father's actions. This confrontation also brought reflections about the past. Memories of childhood arguments, unspoken rivalries, and small misunderstandings surfaced, but alongside them were lessons learned, moments of kindness, and the father's quiet wisdom. The narrator gently reminded the brother of these moments, showing that while greed had caused friction, the love and guidance of their father had always been a constant, waiting to be recognized. The tension that had dominated the family for days began to dissipate. The brother admitted that he had been wrong to assume the estate was about immediate gain. He acknowledged that the father's legacy was about more than wealth. It was about building a family that understood respect, responsibility, and care for one another. For the narrator, this moment was both relieving and humbling. They had known the father's plans were wise, but seeing the brother reach this understanding brought a sense of closure, even if partially. Yet there was one final secret remaining. The father's last note, tucked carefully in the safe, had not yet been revealed. It was clear from the careful placement and emphasis that this final message would bring clarity to all remaining questions. The narrator held it in their hands, knowing that the family's full understanding of the inheritance and their father's true intentions was about to be completed. But the father's final note inside the safe held one more secret that would leave the entire family speechless. It was a truth about legacy, love, and the meaning of everything they had fought over. The narrator held the final envelope from the safe, feeling the weight of the moment. Everything else, the legal papers, letters, and documents had revealed the father's careful planning, but this last note was personal. It was clearly meant to be read only when the siblings were ready to understand his true intentions. The brother, still shaken, watched silently, uncertain whether he could face whatever truth lay inside. The narrator opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside was a letter, written in the father's familiar, precise handwriting. The words were simple, yet powerful. The father spoke not about wealth, but about family, values, and love. He explained why he had structured the inheritance as he did, to teach patience, wisdom, and responsibility. The note revealed his greatest hope, that the family would come together, not fight, and that the fortune would be used to build a legacy of care, not greed. The brother's eyes filled with tears as he read the father's words aloud. He began to understand that his assumptions had been wrong. The father had not wanted him to take what was not rightfully his. He had wanted him to grow, to learn, and to appreciate the value of trust and integrity. The brother admitted, with a voice full of emotion, that he had been blinded by jealousy and entitlement, and that he now saw the importance of what the father had truly left behind. For the narrator, the experience was bittersweet. Relief and sadness intertwined, relief that the family drama was finally resolving. Sadness that it had taken conflict to reveal the father's intentions fully. They felt gratitude for the lessons embedded in the inheritance, realizing that the father's wealth was never just money. It was guidance, wisdom, and a test of character, carefully hidden inside a box. The siblings spent the rest of the day together, reflecting on the father's life and the lessons he had left behind. They shared memories, laughter, and even tears, finally seeing each other not as rivals but as family bound by love and shared history. The narrator emphasized that the true inheritance was not $50 million. It was the values, guidance, and connection their father had worked to instill. As the sun set, a sense of peace settled over them. The father's final note had done more than clarify. The estate had healed old wounds, taught humility, and reminded them of the power of understanding and forgiveness. The safe deposit box, once a source of tension and mystery, had become a symbol of the father's enduring wisdom and care. In the end, the family realized that the inheritance was never about possessions. It was about trust, integrity, and the bonds that outlast wealth. The narrator looked at the brother, now calmer and reflective, and knew that their father's lessons would guide them forever. The safe had not only preserved money, it had preserved values, love, and the family legacy that mattered most. In the end, it wasn't just about money, it was about understanding, forgiveness, and the bonds that truly last. The father's final lesson was clear. Wealth is temporary, but love and integrity endure.